So recently, a friend put me in touch with Jordan, who is a purchaser of one of the original Tesla Roadsters, which is pretty darn cool. So Jordan was kind enough to agree to interview me, and we're going to talk about the Roadster, his experiences with it, the good, the bad, how he bought it, how he sold it. It all sounds quite interesting. So let's have some fun and have a chat. So, hi Jordan, how are you?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm having a good day. It's a big time for Tesla right now with their AI Day coming up. So very exciting news. But let's take a little walk down history lane. So right before we started recording, I was going to ask you how you purchased the car, the original Roadster, and when you purchased it. And I guess I had assumed you bought it from Tesla, but it sounds like that was a little more of a story than I thought. So go for it.
Everything has a story, right? No, we actually bought it on eBay. So the story is, back in 2009 or thereabouts, I had gone out to California, and we have family that lives out in the San Jose area. And I had read all about Tesla at the time, and I thought this was a really cool thing. And I found out while we were there that they actually have the dealership right there in San Jose. So I grabbed my two brothers-in-law, and off we went to test drive the car. And I was completely blown away on various levels. First of all, I just had to sign a little waiver, and they gave us the keys, and they said, "Go have fun." And I'm like, "Wow, this is $100,000 car," and they're just saying, "Go knock yourselves out," right?
Right.
And so off we went, and it was such a trip driving that car, because it was not. I mean, the speed was fun, the acceleration was fun. I've learned to really appreciate that now. But at the time, I was really struck by how quiet it was. I mean, there was just wind noise basically, and there
Right.
was this cool whine when the motor spun up. It sounded like a jet engine. It was a real blast. It was, and that sold me. I said, I got to get one. I don't know if I can afford $100,000 on it for a car right now, but I got to get one of these things.
So I
So
think, like, to put this in perspective, so this was 2009, right? So
about then,
this,
yes,
yeah.
it
So
was,
I mean, this is prior to the Model S. This is
yes,
prior to most people having heard of Tesla. I mean, I've
correct,
heard of it, but vaguely. And that quietness of the car. I mean, this is something you have a Model X also, right? Is that correct?
correct, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I have a Model Y. So, it's kind of more of a common thing now. You drive it and you're like, oh, wow, it's so quiet. And you hear that little whine as it spins up and everything. But this is all very, very not something that anyone is used to at this time. I think the only other real EV car that had been out there was the GM EV1, which, was
Right.
not the same thing as the Roadster by any
Not
means.
even a little, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
so go ahead. So you test drove it and
so I test drove it,
that's
fell in love
great.
with the car, and then I started poking around on the internet. And then a while ago went by, and I saw. Oh, I know what happened. So a while went by, and I actually was contacted by one of the salesmen from California, and he said, "I saw that you were poking around on one of the news groups." And I'm like, "How the hell? This guy's like stalking me or something, right?" And he said, we're delivering, or either they're bringing a car nearby, and they asked if they wanted to bring it by for my wife to drive, because at the time the only dealership in town, and I mean like in town, like southeast, we live
Right,
in Florida,
right,
the nearest dealership I think was Dania Beach, which is near Miami, just north of Miami. The nearest one from that was in like Virginia. So there
right,
was like nothing around. So they were delivering it from, I think, Dania Beach to another owner. And they said, if you want to drive it, if you want to, give your wife a chance to drive it, that would be great. So I said, sure, why not? So they brought it by, and my wife drove it, and she really loved the car. She didn't like the price tag. And I let my son drive it at the same time. And we were both kind of, this really secured my devotion to getting one.
right.
Um, so I kept looking and looking, and a while went by, and I found this car, the one that we bought finally, on eBay. And it was a brilliant yellow, which that's kind of my color, and at
Oh,
least for
cool.
sports cars anyway.
Right.
And for various reasons, actually, because I was thinking mostly for safety, because having a yellow car, it makes it a harder target to have an excuse for hitting.
Right. And of course,
So
sports cars have low, they're relatively low, so it's hard to see them generally.
this what you have to remember, this car is extraordinarily low. Um,
Okay. I've
took
never
it
actually seen one in person, so it's like pretty cool that you experienced
when so one of the reasons I said I'll keep the car until I can't get into it anymore. I mean,
it.
I'm 60 now, so but so I actually took it to an event at one point, and I was a concourse for they were raising it was a charity, so there was a lot of strange cars there. And the most exotic and the most crazy thing that hit me was as I was driving across the grass, I could hear the grass on the bottom of the car, and this was on a lawn that was well maintained.
Wow.
So anyway, so I digress. So we bought the car. So I saw the car on eBay, and I contacted the seller, and it was a large company in California. They basically resold high end cars. And I asked them a little bit about the car, and I asked if they had any kind of it was so this was 2011, and it was a 2010 car. And I asked them if they had done any kind of maintenance checks or anything like that, because I knew those Teslas that the Roadsters required a yearly maintenance on them. New ones don't require anything.
Right.
And I can go into more detail about what was involved with that.
Sure.
But anyway, so I said, I really appreciate it if we could get the battery energy check on it, and just a standard checkup. And they said, sure, no problem. So they sent it off to Tesla. Tesla did their thing and brought it back in, and they shared with me the results, and they were all as expected. They were great.
Right.
So then I started to negotiate with the guy, and he got offended that I was now negotiating with the car dealer. Can you imagine? And so he actually threatened to sue me because because we couldn't come to an agreement on the price. He threatened to sue me because I had asked him to get the paperwork from Tesla on the car. So I told him to go pound sand and let it go.
Right.
So I still kept looking, and the same car appeared again on eBay down in San Jose or in San Diego. So obviously they had traded the car from San Jose down to San Diego. So this guy I talked to, and he was a little bit more amenable to a negotiation, and we wound up buying the car from him. Cool. They shipped the car from San Diego to where we live in Florida, and no issues at all, and it was great. We had a fantastic time with the car.
Wow. So you purchased it in 2011, and if I'm correct, you sold it. Was it 2019 or 2020 when you sold it?
We sold it in 2018.
2018. Okay.
Right.
So still, you had it for 7 years. So that's
actually, no, I think it was closer to. I don't remember. This is pretty bad. It would have been like late 2018, early 2019.
Okay. So you got the car shipped to you, and so test driving something is fun because you do it for like 15 or 20 minutes, but actually owning it, what sort of revelations popped up over the first couple of weeks?
So the coolest thing that ever happened to me, and this is it's like a Zen moment. I came to a stoplight, and there was something prickling on the back of like there was something wrong, right? And I looked around, and there was a Prius on one side of me, and I think another Prius on the other. So basically, there was no sound. Here I'm surrounded by cars, and there's no noise. And it was like, wow, this is what the future is like.
Right. The future is quieter.
It is. It really is. Right shortly after I had the car, I was driving down US 1, which kind of runs up the whole eastern seaboard. In our area in Melbourne, and I came to a stoplight, and this guy pulls up next to me, and in a some kind of souped up something, and it was really a souped up something. I mean, like it had the large slicks in the back, it had a big air scoop in the front, and he starts revving his engine, right? So I looked over at the passenger, and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." I said, "But I tell you what, I'll give you a head start." So when the light turned green, I mean, this is like, should not have been done, right? When the light turned green, this guy took off, and there was smoke everywhere. I mean, it was just unbelievable how much smoke this guy put down. And when his bumper cleared when his rear bumper cleared my front bumper, I launched, When I hit the speed limit, I waved as he went by.
And that was just up to the speed limit. So
up to the speed limit, right?
That's a short period of time.
Remarkable. Yeah. Remarkable. And this guy, I'm sure, was blown away, because he saw that I gave him a good head start to launch. And I think he probably did have a bad launch, because his tires didn't have any traction.
Right.
But as you know, Teslas have complete traction control. So.
And I think that's one of the things that's also kind of revelatory about Teslas is that they don't spin out, right?
Right.
Even with a good modern car, if it's kind of tuned more for racing, it's going to spin out if you're not really careful on how you apply the accelerator. So
right.
Yeah.
Having said that, though, the car definitely was light in the front and it tended to oversteer. So
Interesting.
I actually got myself in two different situations where I scared myself that
Okay.
I should not have been there, and I
Right.
wound up, going further than I should have in a turn.
Gotcha. So as far as you're concerned, like it was really good in a straightaway, but did not handle nearly as well in a turn.
Correct. Although I've seen videos of it racing or one of them racing a Ferrari around an oval, and it just smoked the Ferrari. So the Ferrari would sort of catch up in the corners, and then the Tesla would take off in the
Right.
straightaway.
Right. So that's interesting because that actually indicates, of course, that Tesla had to learn battery placement because, of course, since there's no engine in the front, it's going to be significantly lighter. So you have to kind of adjust the weighting of
Well,
everything.
remember also that it was built on a Lotus chassis. They didn't build the chassis. So they
Right.
bought rolling stock from Lotus, and there's actually a story behind that too. So they were looking for a suitable chassis manufacturer, and they went to Lotus because Lotus made very good lightweight
Right.
automobiles. And they looked at their factory, and the way they built their cars is they were built to order mostly, and they would start to manufacture the car, and they would take yellow stickies, or they would take the order and stick it someplace on the car, to the chassis, to the steering wheel or something. And if it ever got lost, if it fell off, they had no idea what they were building. So Tesla said, no, we got to fix this. So,
Wait,
so
so
they
it
came
was
in,
literally it was like Post-it notes. Like,
I don't know. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it was
right.
probably, I'm assuming it was the order, right? So it was like
Right.
color, size of the end,
Just-
whatever, all that stuff. It would stick it on the car someplace, and it would follow the car as it went through, because it was all hand built, right? And the fiberglass, the panels, I believe, were all fiberglass on the Lotus. On the Tesla, they were all carbon fiber.
Oh, interesting.
And so the interesting thing is, so that the Lotus came in at like 2,800 pounds, something in that range, which is remarkably light for that car.
Right.
I beg your pardon. It came in at 2,000 pounds for the Lotus.
Right.
And then, so Tesla then would take out the fiberglass body. They take out the motor. They take out the transmission. They take out the exhaust system, the fuel tank, and all the other paraphernalia that's associated with an ICE engine. And they replaced it with a motor and battery, and the weight went up 800 pounds.
Jeez. Wow.
So the Roadster was 2,800 pounds, and the Elise was 2,000.
Wow. But still, that's a pretty light battery electric vehicle. Yeah.
Right. Oh, it is. So, but remember that it only had a 250 mile range.
Right. Right.
So it wasn't like the new ones, you're getting 300 plus range on it.
So, well, but it's also a sports car, so it's not like one of those things you're going to take on an 8-hour road trip. It would be a little uncomfortable, probably.
It was very uncomfortable. It was definitely a rough ride.
Yeah.
So the joke was I could roll over a dime and tell if it was facing up or down. So we drove it down to Miami, to the service center.
Right.
It was in a way a bit of a mistake, just because we didn't know what the hell my son and I took it down. We didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
So that was my son's first speeding ticket. And
oh.
But and the cop, it was so funny. The cop comes up, he goes, "I love these things, but here's your ticket."
Yeah, it's fun to get an actual, like, I guess it wasn't his first ticket for a Tesla in that case.
I guess because we were getting closer to the factory, so or to the
Right.
center, the repair center. So that was that. But it was interesting because we had no experience with range anxiety, and we actually did experience. That was the only time I've ever experienced range anxiety was with that car. So we were approaching the service center, and it was in the yellow, because there's you have green, yellow, and red, right? And I think it's pretty much common on the new cars now too.
Right.
And we were getting into the yellow, and I think when it hit red, I called them. I said, "Hey, what am I going to do?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry about it." They said, "You got plenty," because I told them where we were, and we were within a few miles of them. And they said, "You got plenty of mileage. Worst case, we'll come and pick you up."
Right.
So, and sure enough, we had plenty of mileage. We rolled right in, and they were able to charge it while they were servicing it.
Right.
And so we drove it back again. So the whole time that they serviced it was on charge. And then we had a full charge. When we got back, we just drove it home.
Pretty cool. Speaking of that, what kind of charging? Nowadays they charge pretty fast, but I imagine this probably was not a very quick charging vehicle.
It wasn't terrible. I really didn't notice, to be honest, because I didn't drive it. At one point, it was sort of a daily driver, but I wasn't. I'm retired now. I was an engineer, and I would drive. And it was like a couple miles to work. So I would drive it to work and then drive it home again. And that car had terrible parasitic battery loss. So there was
Oh,
stuff that was draining that car that they had no idea what it was.
right.
And it was just assumed that you're going to lose over the course of like an hour, you may lose like 3 or 4 miles range.
Oh
It was
gosh.
bad. It was really bad.
Wow. Yikes. Like it was only a decade ago, but there's so much advances that they've done since then, right? This
Absolutely.
in terms of battery, did you notice a significant range loss over the 7 years or so that you owned it? Or
Not as significant. No, not at all. Because I think we put like 25,000 miles on it or so in that time. It definitely was not a daily driver.
right.
So it really, I didn't put anything. And I was just reading actually an article. They were saying that that they noticed the degradation occurred on the Roadsters because it was because of mileage, not because of age.
Okay.
So
So you could own it for 10 years, and if you only drove it 20,000 miles, it was going to be fine.
it would be
Yeah.
absolutely fine. You'd never
Yeah.
notice it. And even our cars now, the S and the X, they're the loss on those batteries is I wouldn't say it's insignificant, but it's almost inconsequential.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that with the Model Y, and it was as expected. After the first month, it had dropped about maybe 10 miles of range, but then it's leveled out. And I think
Right.
maybe, it was 326 when we first bought it, and now it's like somewhere around 314 or 15. So, and it's really just stabilized at that. It's not dropping anymore. So,
Well, how many miles do you have on your?
I think about 13,000. So it's not a
Oh,
huge
okay.
amount yet. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not
So
like we put a ridiculous amount of miles on it yet, but
we drive our X a lot, and I've got over 40,000 on ours.
oh wow.
And I mean, we've taken it to California and back. It's been to New York and back, and we actually picked it up in Texas, which is another story if you want to hear that one.
Right. So did you buy that one used also then?
I bought it new from. It was considered a new car from Tesla. It was a loaner car because they
Oh,
take a big hit, for miles on it.
right.
And this car had, I think, 7,000 miles or something on it when I bought it. And it was worth the drive and actually the flight to get there and negotiate. We didn't really negotiate. You don't negotiate.
Yeah, you don't
Tesla.
negotiate with Tesla. They just, which I
And it's
actually,
basically what.
my experience buying a Tesla has convinced me never to go to an auto dealership again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No
It's like,
question.
if you don't like the price, don't buy the car. I mean, that's basically what it is, because they're not going
Exactly.
to. Have you seen recently? I saw that Toyota and Honda, because of the chip shortage and the supply chain shortage, dealerships are actually marking up cars $10,000 per car right now, just as a market. I'm like, whoa.
I
So,
was talking to a friend of mine who used to be in the car business. He's now a realtor, and he's still in touch with a lot of his friends that are in car business. And he says they don't even advertise anymore because people are coming to them. They're not pushing the cars at all,
wow.
which is
Interesting.
amazing. So that's why they're able to mark these cars up and get crazy. So and also, I mean, you can buy a used car and sell it for more money than you paid for it.
Oh yeah, I know for a fact. Like, I keep saying that to my wife. I'm like, "Jesus, we could sell the Model Y for more than we bought it for right now." And she's like, "Why would you do that?" And I said, "I wouldn't, but I'm just, it's a
Right.
you buy a car and you just expect it's going to be a depreciating asset forever, right? And it's like, it's a weird thing to think that it's actually increased in value. It's
Right.
a weird world we're living in right now. So back to the Roadster. So it sounds like you drove it, short distances and not daily driver kind of thing. Did you ever happen to take it to a track or anything and really open it up, or?
No, I never took it to a track. And mostly because the tracks near us are kind of they're further away, and there's really no charging apparatus there. So it would take significant charge to get there, and then I'd have to wait a significant amount of time before I could drive it, and then I have to wait to come back home again.
Right.
So now not a lot of the tracks have charging stations, and the new cars charge so much faster. So
Right.
it would be kind of interesting to do that, but no, I never did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I was just curious, but so you said you got caught twice doing, getting into a turn too far. And
Right.
I'm just like, I don't know, pick one of them or both or whatever. I'm
Sure.
just
No.
curious what caused that, like what created that situation.
Well, I mean, it was a light situation was turning, and I wanted to kind of goose it through the so I didn't get caught in the light, and I wound up on the grass. I mean, I actually went off the shoulder and into the grass. Yeah, it was a major surprise for me.
Wow.
Just because there may have been grit on the road or something, and the front end slipped out from underneath it and it just kept going. Yeah, that was kind of a shock. And then the other one was I pulled in front of somebody, which is I've learned, that it's really bad. I mean, I don't know if you've learned that in Teslas now. I'm very cautious about pulling in front of people because you know what the car can do, but other people don't. And so you may have plenty of room to accelerate in front of them, but I mean, why put that stress on another driver? So I
Right.
don't do that. But this was right after I had the car and I was I was full of myself.
Right.
And so I pulled in front of this guy, and sure enough, the front end slipped out from underneath it. But luckily, I was able to get it back under control. And I felt like an idiot. And maybe
Right.
that was my training, for doing it.
Yeah, especially because you did it right in front of somebody. So you're like,
Right.
hi, I'm an idiot.
Exactly. And that's pretty much what I did. I don't recall what the guy said or did, did in response, but
You probably got a couple of gestures.
yeah, I may have. Yeah, they were waving at me in such a friendly manner. Just a one finger wave, right?
So the one where so basically you were on kind of like a 4-lane highway situation with a light, and you were going around a corner when you did the one that ended up in the grass, or
Correct. Right.
yeah.
So the light was turning, and it was a 2-lane going into a 1-lane. It was a
Oh,
T, and I was on the top of the T, and I was
right.
turning off the T and into the vertical part of the T, if you will. And so instead of winding up in the lane, I wound up drifting across the lane, and actually I think the right wheels got into the grass.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
that
that
must
was
have
kind
been
of
so that was relatively soon after you purchased the car.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So after that, I just learned not to do anything strange, and
Right.
and certainly when it was raining, I was ultra cautious because
Right.
because when it rains in Florida, it really rains,
Oh yeah. Every time I
and
drive
that's
to Florida, there's a giant monsoon kind of event
it
that
follows
happens.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's another thing. That car, when I had both tops. I had a hard top and a soft top. And the soft top I would keep up in the summer. In the winter, I put the hard top up. And the soft top leaked like a sieve. So
Oh,
so I mean, it was terrible.
gosh.
But that was left over from the Lotus. So it was a Lotus soft top, which I could have purchased from Lotus to replace it if I wanted to.
Right.
But I assumed all Lotuses leak the same way. I don't know.
Crazy.
British cars, right?
It's just so different. I mean, the handling of the Model Y never, like in a turn, it just feels
Yeah,
so stable. I assume the
right.
X also.
Yeah,
So it's interesting how rapidly Tesla had to learn to do all this. Because excellent software people and excellent engineers, but not car builders. So there's a lot of little things that you don't think about until you actually build a car.
correct.
So yeah. So tell me about the maintenance stuff, because it's interesting, because one of the big benefits, of course, of owning a modern Tesla is that the first maintenance is basically 4 years, aside from rotating tires and stuff. Yeah.
Well, there is no maintenance. I don't plan on taking my car in for maintenance ever. My ex. The only
Yeah.
time it goes in is if there's something broken, or something
Yeah.
doesn't work right.
They
So
told me after 4 years I was supposed to get the battery fluid replaced, but that was the first time. Anyway, so
I never heard that.
Okay.
But anyway, so yeah, so with that car, it had a yearly maintenance, and that involved. So there is a powered electronics model 10 that sat on top of the battery, and it was the width of the car, maybe 18 inches, 2 feet wide, and 10 inches deep, and and basically what that provided all the electronics. It provided the computer, smarts for air conditioning, because they use the same air conditioner for the cabin as well as for the battery. In fact, at one time we were driving, and it was hot outside, and I suddenly lost air conditioning in the cabin. So I
Oh,
immediately called Tesla and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And they were able to pull logs from my car, but they couldn't push anything to it. So any
right.
kind of updates they had to bring the car in. So they pulled the logs for it, and they said, "Oh, it was just getting hot outside, so the air conditioner redirected to all of its power going to the battery." So that
So
the
it's like
driver
it's like the old cars when you go up the steep hills and the air conditioning cuts out because it doesn't have enough power to power it. So, yeah. So,
kind of like that, exactly. So anyway, so the electronics was in the PEM, and they literally removed the PEM, and they would open it up and they would blow it out, and it would pick up all these leaves and crud and dust and everything, and they'd have to,
Oh,
you know, blow out all this junk, and they put it back. Then there were these massive blower motors underneath the car, so they had to, and they'd come to the house to do it, which was great, right?
oh,
And
that's cool.
they
That's cool.
yeah. So and, I mean, so the first time we just went to them for, you know, just for a ride, you know. But then they said we can come to you, and I said, okay, let's do that in the future.
Yeah.
So, so then they take the car and they back it up over, you know, a set of chocks, and then they drop there was a pan in the bottom of the car. They dropped the pan out, and which is basically just an aluminum sheet. And then under the pan was pretty much open. That's where the bottom of the battery was. And then they had these two big blower motors, and they would drop those out and they would clean those. And that's where a lot of dust and leaves would collect in there. So it was basically just a cleaning thing. It took them a few hours to do it, probably 3-4 hours to do all this work.
And that
And
was
they put
once
it all
per
back
year.
together. I'm sorry?
It was once per year that they had
Once
to do
per
that.
year. Yeah,
Wow.
every year they come and do that. And it was one of those things where after I saw it the first time, I'm like, okay, I'm doing this every year, because I just saw how much was involved.
Right.
And it was, so the blowers I could have done myself easily, but the PEM involved resetting stuff, and you know, it was, you know, there was reset in the software, and plus they would come out and update the software if there was any changes and things like that.
Right.
And then so that was the maintenance on the car. One year they came out and they were servicing it, and there was this loud explosion,
Oh, jeez.
and everybody's looking at each other like, what the heck was that? And they say, well, we don't really know. So they went to put it in
That
gear.
was the service people that didn't know
That
what
was
it
the service people.
That's
that
not
were doing it.
good. Yeah.
And they went to put it in gear to get it off the chocks, and it wouldn't go. So they literally could not move the car because the battery had disengaged itself, and nothing was going to happen. So they got on the phone to Fremont to
Right.
figure out how to disengage it, because the car was half out of my garage. So I couldn't close my garage door.
Oh, jeez.
So they got it back. Basically, they were able to, via phone call and some tools, they were able to get it into neutral and, you know, coast it off the chocks. And they said, we'll get back to you.
So it just sat in your driveway for a while?
It sat in the garage, and luckily they were
okay.
able to get it back in the garage. No, that was definitely a garage queen.
Yeah.
So it lived in the garage, except for, you know, when it couldn't. And then so after a few days, they got back to me and they said, well, the battery's definitely smoked and we're going to have to replace it.
Oh, gosh.
So that happened, and nothing with those cars happened quickly. So toward the end of my life with that car, I'd say I had the car about 50% of the time.
Oh, my goodness.
It was pretty bad, and it wasn't necessarily because of maintenance or because of time. It was parts. The biggest problem was parts. So they replaced the battery and got it all back installed, and everything was, you know, was fine for a while. Then we were on vacation. We came back again, and I couldn't get the car. Nothing happened. So I, you know, tried to start the car, and the car had a real key, by the way. So
Oh, wow.
So it had a key that you put into the ignition and turned. Go figure.
to what, did it have a little fake startup sound or something when you do that?
No, it wouldn't do anything. It just went and it clicked, and then you were in gear. And I had the sport, so if you turned it again, if you clicked it again, it would go into the sport mode. So, which again did nothing, you know, audibly, but you could see a little difference in the gauge. I think there was a difference in the gauge, so you knew that you were in sport mode. So anyway, nothing would happen. I put it in, nothing. The lights would go on. So I called Tesla, and they said, well, I don't know. So they came out. They sent a flatbed out, and they literally dragged the car out of the garage. I still have skid marks in my garage from where they dragged it out. And they were able to, so they used, this was kind of interesting. They used nylon chocks. They slammed, after they got the car out a little bit, they were able to get nylon chocks under the wheels, and the nylon slid on the concrete a little bit better.
Oh, yeah.
So they were able to slide it around, and you know, they still were using winches to get it ready, and to get it, you know, aligned to go up onto the flatbed.
Right.
So they got on the flatbed, and you know, a couple of days go by, and they go, well, you know, we're gonna have to replace the battery, but this time it's on you. I'm like,
What?
oh, God, what is this? Well, we weren't under warranty any longer at that point, because the warranty on those cars was, I think, 2 years or something crazy like that, and the battery was not much longer than that. So anyway, so they gave us, you know, it wasn't a crazy, it was a crazy number, but we were able to negotiate with them, and you know, we got it down to something, you know, somewhat affordable. Right. And so they said, okay, fine, we're going to send your battery off to, actually, that's what happened. So they sent our battery off to Fremont to get repaired. So a month goes by, and I called them. I said, "Hey, what's going on with my battery?" And they go, "We don't know. We'll get back to you." So, a week goes by. I call them. What's going on? I don't know. We've got calls into the factory. We're trying to find out what's happening. So finally, after like 2 months, they call me back and they go, "Well, Jordan, we lost your battery. It's someplace in the Fremont.
The battery.
They lost the battery. It's someplace in the Fremont factory. We don't know where it is. We're going to have to send you another one."
Oh my gosh, that's a pretty big thing to lose. I mean, it is a big factory, so I guess
it's a huge factory, and their concentration was on the S at the time, and
Right.
it probably got squirreled away, and there's probably only a handful of people who could work on the thing. Remember, this thing was made with 2,800 lithium-ion battery cell, a laptop battery cells, right?
Right.
So they were there. Imagine like a little oversized AA. That's what this thing was made with. And they were all welded together by hand.
Oh,
It was a nightmare to build this thing. So finding somebody to fix it was probably the same case. So they probably found one that was sitting on a shelf, and they said, "Let's ship this thing off." So anyway, so I got it. It was a rebuilt one as well, but
Right.
and it had this. So they guaranteed me the same life or more in the battery. So and I
Okay.
did. They gave me the same life
Okay.
basically. So
Wow, it's pretty remarkable. It's very interesting because it's so. I think at each level, you never purchased a Model S, did you? Or did you?
No,
Okay.
no.
So yeah, because it felt like the early Model S's. My niece's husband's parents bought a 2012 Model S, and so they
Okay.
gave it to them so they now have a used 2012 Model S that my niece has. But it definitely does not feel like a modern Tesla. There's a lot of advances. So it seems like each iteration, they just keep getting better and better at building these cars and making them more, also easier to build. Because,
Yes,
instead of welding them by hand, like the battery pack connections, which is insanity.
Well, the new battery tabs they're not even electrolytically welded. I think they're just
Right.
stuck together, right?
Yeah, I think so.
With the new the new battery size. Yeah, and what's cool about Tesla is they don't really have a model year, right? It just
Right.
it just changes. So have you ever been to the factory?
I've been to the factory, but it was during COVID and it was shut down, so I couldn't tour
Okay.
it, which is
So I've actually been I've been on tour several times because we have family there, and it's always
cool.
kind of been fun to see how it's progressing, right? So
Right.
my first visit, they were not quite building the S yet. So they
cool.
still were they didn't have a little tram. So now they have a tram. It's like Disney World. You get on the tram, and they take you around. But at the time, they you could walk, and they only had the factory is vast. I mean, you've seen it, right? So
Right.
it's I've forgotten how many. It's like the largest building under air in the world or something.
Yeah.
The statistics are phenomenal in this
Right.
car.
Until they finished like the one in Texas, probably, because that one.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah.
bigger.
Well, actually, the new one, the Gigafactory in Nevada is probably bigger, but
Right.
at the time, anyway, this thing was vast. But they were using like a tiny corner of it, and everything was black because it was originally it was owned by Toyota and GM, right? And the story with that is hilarious. And every time I hear it, it just blows my mind how stupid GM is.
Right.
So GM and Toyota had that. It was called the NUMMI factory, and they built built cars that were tagged both for GM and for Toyota. I've forgotten which one. I think like the oh gosh, I don't remember. Anyway,
I'll look for it afterwards and put a picture.
Okay. Anyway,
of it up.
so they were building cars together, and then at the time the contract ended, GM said, "No, we want to go our way," and Toyota said, "Well, look, we'd like to keep this relationship going a little longer. We're working on this new car that we think that you'd be interested in, and we'd love to, for you guys to badge it as a GM product as well."
Right.
That new car was called the Prius.
Yeah.
And GM said, "No, that's okay. We're going to do our own thing." So Toyota basically walked away from the factory, and then Tesla bought it for pennies on the dollar.
Right.
In fact, they got some significant incentive by the state of California because they hired all these people. So anyway, so back to our story. So we go into the factory, and the whole factory was black, painted dark, nasty, dingy, ugly brown or dark,
Right.
And you go to the part where Tesla is, and it's all Tesla white and red everywhere,
Right.
But it was
just a little baby corner,
like a tiny corner of the whole factory, right? And it was really cool because, and I think it's still the same way, that the engineers have desks right there on the assembly line. So they have so they have desks upstairs where their offices are, and that's where all the brain power occurs, right? But whenever there's an issue on the factory line that's going on, they bring the guys down on the factory line, and it doesn't resolve until they don't go back to their desk until it's resolved, basically.
Right.
And even Elon has a desk on the factory. He did anyway. Has a desk right on the factory floor. So there's this tiny corner of the factory that was assigned to engineers with desks.
That's pretty cool.
So now when you go to
that's
the
the way to
factory,
solve a problem faster too, instead of
yeah, exactly, because you're right there with the guys that are fixing the problem.
Right.
So it's brilliant, right? Because the engineers have got their own. I mean, I'm sure you've seen cars that are just designed so wacky it doesn't make. The classic one is I think Lincoln had an engine you couldn't replace two of the spark plugs in because they were in the chassis was in the way.
Right.
And that's just flat out stupid. You have to drop the engine to change the spark plug.
I've had that happen. I've cursed out. I know Mini Cooper, and I think another VW that I've owned, trying to replace the oil filter, because I like to do my own oil change.
Sure.
You had to remove the turbo pump on the Mini Cooper in order to get to. I'm like, who designs this thing?
But that's a German
every
car.
5,000 miles you have to take off.
But that's a German engine, right?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's a BMW engine. Those things. So
it's BMW that makes it. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Right. So that blows my mind right there. That's crazy because they're generally smarter about things than that.
Right.
Wow.
Anyway, I think what they want people to have to go to the Mini Cooper or BMW dealership to get it replaced, and then and then you can charge them $100 for your oil change instead of doing it for.
It's exactly what Elon says, right? He says that car dealerships are really service centers that sell cars,
right?
And they make all their money on. I mean, they'll sell cars at a loss because they know that you're going to come back to get them serviced.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. So I guess so we've been talking for a really long time, and I don't want to keep you too much longer.
Okay.
But so first of all, tell me, unless you have something else you want to talk about, the most unexpected thing about the Tesla Roadster that you discovered while you owned it, or experience, or something.
I guess the whole experience of owning the car was surreal. I mean, I would get people come up to me and they were just in awe of the car. So this was years later. They knew about Tesla and the S was out, and everybody, I shouldn't say it, many people knew what the car was.
Right.
And they were just so impressed to see the car. And it's funny because we actually live in Satellite Beach, which is a suburb of Melbourne.
Right.
And we live in a community in Satellite Beach, and there was actually a Roadster in this community before we bought ours.
Wow. Okay.
So it was kind of funny. But they live in here as well as in Washington, so they kind of commute back and forth. And so I think they had another one up there and they spend most of their time up there. So you rarely saw that car.
Right.
But it was just kind of a funny anecdote that there are actually two Roadsters in this community.
Yeah, it's because how many did they make? They only made a few thousand of those things.
They made 2,500 or thereabouts. Yeah.
Yeah.
A handful of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them have been wrecked, right? And some of them are museums
right.
And I tried to. So we actually have a car museum here. And when I was getting ready to sell the car, so my deal with my wife was that when we bought the X, that I would sell the Roadster. Right. And I found this good deal on the X, so I said we got to buy the X now. So I bought the X, and so we wound up having both. I've got some pictures of both the X and the X next to X and the Roadster next to each other.
I think I actually saw that picture. Yeah, so yeah, I'll definitely ask you to send me a bunch of pictures of the car.
Sure, be glad to. We wound up with both cars at one time, and I hate keeping a car out outside. And so my wife's Prius was out. That was our gas guzzler now. There's her Prius.
So 43 miles a gallon.
So that was parked outside, and it was kind of irking me that any car was parked outside, but it was irking me to sell the Roadster. So I put it on some obscure website, for sale, hoping that no one would find it, right? Because I was dotting my end of the bargain, right?
Right.
And somebody found it, and they wanted to buy we started chatting at first, and it was a weird. Really, I couldn't tell if he was like scamming me or initially. And then finally, I called him and we started chatting and we kind of hit it off. And he's a really nice guy. He's a surgeon in San Diego, and originally from Cambodia, and now he practices here. Anyway, so he flew out from San Diego to look at the car. I took a lot of pictures for him and sent them to him. And he saw the car, drove the car, was happy with it. we took the cashier's check down to the bank, and it was from the same bank that my wife banks with. So we were able to, deposit it, and everything was copacetic. And so we were good with that. So I told him, I said, okay, I said, now, I think it makes sense for me to since you now officially own the car, it makes sense for me to take the insurance off, but I won't take it off until you get insurance for the car.
Right.
So he said, fine. So he called me like a day later and he said, okay, I've got insurance for the car. So I said, fine. So I removed my insurance from the car. And then he found a trucking company to ship the car to San Diego. So the truck shows up, and we finagled the car on, and it went on. There was a Bentley on there. There was a Beetle for some reason. And there was a couple of other exotic cars, that were on this trailer. It was an exotic car carrier, right?
Right.
So I took a lot of pictures, showed, pictures for the new owners showing that it got safely on. So if there are any scratches or anything, it's on the driver, right?
Yeah.
So off it goes. So a couple of days later, I get a call from the driver of the semi, and he was asking if because there was a GPS at one time on the car that was kind of like the S and the X that the Teslas have now, right? So you could find out where the car was, and also you could download logs and things like that. So they had an older version of SIM card in the car. And I said, yeah, but I'm not sure if it's functioning or, we can figure out where. So anyway, so I contacted Tesla and they go, nah, that ship's sailed. So I told them we couldn't tell where the car was.
So how did this get lost off the back of a semi truck?
So the guy's story goes that he was having issues with his rig. So he pulled into a repair shop, and they said that it was going to take a few days to fix the rig.
Right.
So he, I guess, rather than sleeping in the rig where there's a perfectly good bed,
right? Yeah. Exactly.
He got a hotel room, and he was staying in the hotel room. And sometime during the night or during the day, it may have happened during broad daylight, another rig shows up and says, hey, I'm here to offload those cars. No. And so the mechanic goes, what do I know? Sure, go for it. And of course, the keys for all the cars were in the front seat of each car. And that's kind of sounds like a red flag right there. You'd think that the driver would have them in his pocket at all times, right?
Yeah, especially with exotic cars. We're not talking about $30,000 cars.
Right.
We're talking about,
Right.
So this sounds like a little bit of a fell off the back of the truck sort of deal potentially.
So I have a friend of mine who's in the business, and I said, look, this sounds really shady. And he goes, absolutely. He said nine times out of 10, these kind of things come right back to the driver. The driver is involved somehow. So I don't know how it ended, but so anyway, so we got the other fellow involved with the buyer and told him what was going on. And so of course, he immediately contacted his insurance company and started to get, go down that path. So a few months go by, and I got a letter from the San Diego impound lot saying my car has been impounded. So I called them up and I said, not my car.
Yeah.
And they go, yeah, we figured that out, after, I guess they did a title search and they figured it out.
Right.
So I said, yeah, we understand it's not your car. So it's not your problem. And in fact, it's not anybody's problem because the insurance company is going to cover it all.
Right.
So, so I saw pictures of, in the lot of what it looked like. And so my wife goes, okay, you got to go there and buy the car. Cause she knew I was kind of pining for it.
Right.
So I looked at the car and I said, I'd love to have the car back again, but I don't know if I really want to deal with the headaches of it because it was becoming a problem because the repairs were taking longer to get done.
Right.
And it was just, although now Rich rebuilds, I don't know if you're familiar with Rich.
I know, right?
He's just moved right down like in Ocala, so it's like right here.
Oh.
So
man.
anyway, so that would have been an option, hindsight being 2020.
Yeah, he probably would have loved working on your car. He would have been like,
yeah, no kidding.
Send it on in.
It would have been a great opportunity to meet him and stuff too. So anyway, so long story short, I said, I can't do this because I said if the battery's been sitting at this point, had been sitting probably 5-6 months, and hadn't been charged.
Right.
And the door was held closed with a piece of string because everything is electric on that car, right? So they couldn't close it for the latch to close on.
Right,
it.
right.
And it's been sitting out in the sun, and I'm like, no, I just want to pass on this.
Right.
So but I did watch the auction to see, what was going on with it, and it sold, and it sold for like 30,000 or something, which is more than I was willing to pay for it. I figured, I was going to go maybe 10,
right.
and then deal with the headaches, right?
Right.
So anyway, so I forgot about it, and then I belong to Tesla Motors Club online, and I got a message, a private message from somebody, and because there was, so I don't know, are you on that group,
Uh,
the Tesla Motors
on
Club?
Facebook or
No, it's just a general group.
oh,
It's a great group if you're not
yeah, I
on
should
it.
probably join that. Jeez,
So anyway, there's a thread on there. It's called the yellow bricked Roadster. That's my car.
that's your
on that.
car.
So the guy that bought the car bought it sight unseen, had it shipped to New York, where it lost its top somehow. It lost the hard top.
Oh,
So
gosh.
somebody swiped the hard top from it. They put it on a ship, and it was shipped to Kyiv, Ukraine.
Right.
So the new owner of the car is in Kyiv, and he has actually serviced these cars before, so he knew what he was getting into, and he knew that he felt that he could recover the battery, and
Right.
was comfortable with that.
Right.
So so then we had this dialogue back and forth of and he was like so impressed how the condition of the car and everything, because I mean I did baby the car.
Oh, okay.
So
So no one knows what happened to the car between when it disappeared off the truck and when it appeared in the impound lot?
no. It was found on the side of the road, and I think what happened was they drove it till they ran out of electricity, and they didn't know how to charge it. I mean, all the charging cables were there because that car had a 220 volt outlet that you could plug into, and it had an inline charger, kind of like what what you get when you buy a Tesla, right? That
Right.
box that comes with it. It looked a little bit like very clunky. Oh my God, very clunky. It looked like I built it in my garage. So, and the wire on it was massive. I mean, we're talking like almost an inch and a half inch in diameter. I mean, it was a massive wire.
So like, this kind of like,
Yeah, it was like that. It was huge.
Jeez.
And so when I saw the first, when I went to a dealership, and what do they call them? They call them
showroom.
Showroom. And I went to a showroom, and they showed me the new ones. I'm like, holy crow! So okay, the charging cables that they have at the supercharger.
Yeah.
It was at least as big as that,
Oh,
but much heavier, because it was like all copper.
wow.
It was massive.
Couldn't even afford to build those things anymore because it's so expensive to buy copper right now. Right.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of data going back and forth on the supercharger one. So there's probably a fiber optic link or some kind of link going back and forth.
Right.
This one had nothing. It was just copper.
Well, plus the fact those things are 250 plus kilowatt hour. They're really massive amounts of electricity flowing through there. So.
Well, and that's the thing. So but when you boost the voltage, you can reduce the current, right?
Right.
So with this, we're not talking massive amounts of voltage, right? I mean, I don't know what voltage it was. It was 220 coming out of the wall, but I don't know what the box was converting it to.
Yeah.
But so I did have an adapter, but the adapter was amazingly clunky also. So it was this big pigtail that you unplug, you have to unplug it out of the box and plug in this pigtail to plug it into 110,
Wow.
And so you could get
incredibly cumbersome.
It was right. So my wife liked to she called it our Frankenstein, because it was like built from all these different pieces, parts,
Right.
It really did kind of look clunky. And you could get, so with the Tesla, you can, for the charger, there's little adapters that you can plug into the end of them, and I think you can get a kit for like $50 or something. I don't know what it is,
right?
But that one, to get a full set, was like $800 or something, because each pigtail was like a foot long, and it had a connector on one side and a connector on the other. It was very clunky. I
actually just bought a NEMA 1450, which is the 4-prong
right
on one, and it was $55, but it fits just straight into the standardized Tesla cord. So
and you probably
not the same at all.
So you probably bought it from Tesla, right?
Yeah, I did.
So there's aftermarket that's a lot cheaper than that now.
Right. Oh, I didn't know that they had the little funky little plug thingies, that because Tesla uses their own little proprietary connector.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. But 3D printers are king, so you can print anything you want.
Exactly. I did notice. I've been staring at your 3D printer the whole time, going like, "Ooh, nice." So
that's another project my son and I are working on. So one thing was I did have early on, I had a crack in the windshield. It was a chip or something, cracked the windshield. So I called Tesla in Dania Beach, and I said, "Hey, here's the situation," and they said, "Oh, no problem. We'll come pick it up." And I called the insurance company, and they covered the whole thing, soup to nuts. Right. And I'm like, okay, because it was over a certain size, and we sort of review and everything. Yeah. So I said, great. So they come and flatbed it, and they said, we got one in stock. We'll have it turned around. We'll have it back to you in 2 days. I'm like,
nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
So they get down there and they call me and they go, we got a problem. And I said, what's the problem? They said, well, you have a 2010. And I'm like, yeah. And they said, we have a 29 or 2011 or whatever windshield.
Right.
I'm like, yeah. And they said, well, the VIN is in a different location. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So the VIN on the windshield, right?
Right.
It's like in the lower right corner, like underneath the steering wheel,
Yeah.
in bed. They had shifted it by an inch or something like that. And they're not, by law, they're not allowed to move that. So because it was moved, they had to order a windshield specifically for the car. So they had to get one from Fremont and ship it from California to Florida to replace my window. So what should have been like 2 days wound up to be like 3 weeks.
Oh gosh, it just makes you realize how one-off all of these things were. Kind of almost
Absolutely.
each car was its own individual entity because it was being
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And the other thing I wanted to touch on was the tires. It was crazy. So I get 5,000 miles out of a set of rear tires.
What?
So, but they weren't like over the top expensive. I think they were each like about $150, $180, something like that. I mean, I've spent way more than that on tires before. Or I shouldn't say I have. I've seen people spend way more than that on tires.
But why was it? Just the differential was poor or something, and they were?
No, it was wear. So they wear pretty evenly. The problem was the weight, because a lot of the weight was. So the Lotus was considered a mid-engine car, but I think when they put the battery in, it was no longer mid-engine; it was rear engine, and that probably caused the front end to be light. I mean, I did push that car over 100 at one point, and it scared the heck out of me.
Right.
Because I really felt like, I mean, obviously it wasn't going to happen, but I felt like the wind was getting in underneath underneath
it was going to tip.
It was going to lift,
Yeah.
So, and that probably contributed to why I slipped through the turn. I think there was just a lot of weight in the rear tires, and I think that just the torque was just unbelievable. Coming between the weight and the positioning of the battery. But the good news, I get 10,000 out of the front ones.
Right. So there you go. Wow. Still, that's a little. I mean, I guess when you're buying a sports car, you expect to be replacing the tires relatively quickly. Anyway,
my brother-in-law actually he drives Ferraris, and he said that's not bad. He said 5,000 miles on a set of tires not bad at all.
Right.
So,
and at least you're only spending $150 on the tires instead of probably the Ferrari's probably more like 800 or 900 per tire.
Right. Well, and you probably can only have it done at a Ferrari dealership, and I could tell you stories about his problems. To get an oil change, he flatbeds it to Orlando, which is like an hour and 20 minutes away. And what normally should cost like $50 for an oil change, it costs him like $1,500 or something like that. And then by the way, this is a Ferrari thing. Oh, while we're in there, we noticed that your differential needs to be adjusted. So we'll tack on another $3,000 for that.
The dollar signs just keep adding up.
I had a friend who had it sounds like I have all these friends with exotic cars, but he had a Lamborghini, and he said the same thing would happen. He took it in for something, and the next thing he knows, he's replacing the transmission, which he thought was fine, right?
Jeez. Oh my gosh. Wow. This is exactly the reason why with the gas cars that I have, like the Mini Cooper, I found a guy who would change the oil, because if you bring it into the BMW dealership, they're like, oh, you need this and this, and and suddenly it's like a $75 oil change is $2,000, and you're like, what?
So, this is frightening. I found out that our local Toyota dealership actually gives the repairman a commission. So when they find things, so when they find things, it's to their benefit to find problems with your car.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Right, which is horrible when you think about it. Absolutely horrible.
Not surprising though. Horrible, but not surprising. So yeah.
Right, and as long as if they're getting reimbursed by the factory, what do they care, right?
Exactly.
What do I care? I'm getting a new part or something getting fixed. That's great. As a part owner, it's free, but the factory's getting gouged.
Speaking of that, for like, did Tesla do those yearly maintenance things? Was that on you or on them?
That was on me. That was on me. And I want to say it wasn't over the top. It was like $800 or something like that. Right. Which considering they came to me, and then there weren't, I don't recall there being too many parts involved. So it was mostly time, but for 3 or 4 hours in my garage, plus another hour round trip, 10 hours, 5 hours
Oh yeah,
6 hours. Yeah, I figured that was not too bad.
right.
Plus the responsibility of breaking something.
Yeah, no, that sounds. And again, you just have to kind of consider that it's a sports car. It's a luxury type of car, so
Right.
you're not buying it like a Toyota Corolla where you're like, oh, minimum amount of cost all the time. It's like, no,
Right.
you're going to spend money on this and take
Right.
care of it. So, yeah.
Although the 3 is cheaper in the end than a Camry,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I mean, the
Yeah.
reason why we ended up buying our Model Y was because we ran it against the Mazda CX-5, and I realized that if you include resale at the end of it, that it would be substantially cheaper if you owned it it was only like 3 years, 3.5 years before the break even happened. And I was like, well, hell, it's just a cash flow issue at that point because you have to pay more money up front, but it balances out. So
Exactly.
so, yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's interesting because I posed, because we belong to an electric group, and that's the electric car group, and that's how I got kind of in touch with you.
Right.
And I posed the question the other day. I said, do you feel like you're driving the future and everybody else is normal, or do you feel like you're normal and everybody else is behind the times?
Right.
And almost everybody said they were driving the future, right? But I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm normal. I feel like I'm the car. I guess because I've been driving electric cars for 10 years now.
Right.
But I feel like this is a normal way to drive a car. And so whenever we rent cars, we travel. And when we rent cars, I mean, I feel awkward. It's like I got to go find a gas pump. This was hilarious. You want to hear a really funny story?
Sure.
So one day I had my wife's Prius and I had an appointment, so I had to get to the appointment. So I'm going to the appointment, and I noticed the car's running out of gas. I got to get gas. So now I'm like, oh, dumb. Now I got to go find a gas station, right? So, and I'm really panicking because I got time, because whenever I leave the garage with an electric car, it's topped up and ready to go. Right. But I didn't even notice it with a Prius, and I'm getting close to the dentist, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can make it. Right. So now I got to find a gas station. Right. So now I get to the gas station, and I'm looking at this is hysterical. I'm looking at the pump, trying to remember how to, to swipe the card and all that stuff. And I don't have dementia or Alzheimer's yet. But
no, I understand.
I was laughing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It happens the same with me. I get to the gas station and I'm like, how does this work again?
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that is a kind of a funny anecdote aside with owning an electric car, right? But yeah, so I think that we're past the normal stage or the future stage. I think we're normal, and I think people that are buying electric cars are just stupid. I mean, not buy ICE cars, gasoline car cars. They haven't done the math. They don't understand. But, I was talking to a friend of mine today, and I just met him. His wife and my wife are friends, and so they were over. Right. And so we were chatting about electric cars, and then he was kind of like shocked. I was telling him that there's no maintenance on the cars, and it's incredibly cheap to charge, and he was more worried about driving to California. And I said, well, yeah, we drove to California, we came back again with the car, and yeah, it took a few extra stops, but I wouldn't say that it took a lot longer than if I were to drive by myself, because I don't do well at for driving 16 hours at a time. I'm only good for so many miles, and then I got to stop and walk around, take a break, take a nap, do whatever,
Right.
So yeah, it took us longer, but I wouldn't say it took us like 5 hours longer. It took maybe 3 hours longer, on a 16-hour trip or something.
Yeah.
I don't consider that a problem.
Right.
So, and because I had the Roadster when I bought the Model X, I was able to get free charging. So I have free
nice
supercharging. Yeah. So
nice.
Yeah, it didn't cost me a dime.
Right. Yeah, that's what we actually went to Boca Chica. We went to go see SpaceX in the spring, and we have a free year of supercharging, which is really nice when we bought the car. And I tell you, the big revelation to me was, I don't know, I'd driven it around, and especially my wife is very reticent to try technology, and so she would never try the autopilot, right? We have the full self-driving and all that stuff. And she was like, no, it's too scary and all that stuff. But what you realize is when you're on a road trip like that, after several hours of driving, your brain just gets addled, right? It's just not good anymore. And that car was, you just put it on that autopilot and you kind of monitor it. And it made me so much more confident about driving longer hours. And it was so much less stressful not to have to think. It's a bit like, oh gosh, I got to make sure I don't crash into something. And 11 o'clock at night, and you're just like, not paying attention. So
100% agree.
yeah,
100% agree. And at the end of a long trip like that, you're not exhausted. You're actually, you have some energy left.
right.
And in fact, when we did our trip, my wife actually did use autopilot, and she's the same way. She doesn't. I use autopilot whenever possible because we have full self-driving.
I pull out of the driveway and turn it on. I'm like, go.
So do you have the beta yet?
No, I'm not one of the lucky few. So.
Yeah, I don't either. I've been, and I was kind of disappointed. This figure as an early owner,
Actually, you more than I, because I've only had one recently. But yeah, you've had one since 2011 or so. So you should.
So we had the X. We bought the X late 18.
Right. No, but I mean, you had the Roadster too, so you're like an original, OG kind of like Tesla guy. So
right, and I do feel like I feel a bit like a bit of a schmuck whenever I bring the car in for service. I do drop that. I say, oh, by the way, I did have a Roadster for a while, and they're like, oh,
yeah, exactly. So they're like, wow, you've been with Tesla longer than we have. So
we just had a Powerwall installed, and the guys that were putting it in. We were chatting, and they said, "Oh, you got a Tesla?" I said, "Yeah, I actually had a Roadster before." And they were like, "Really?" And I had to bring out my phone and show them pictures and stuff.
That's so cool.
And they were like more ensconced with that, than the guys at the dealership, the service center.
Right.
So that was pretty funny.
That's cool. So did you end up buying the solar roof or solar panels with the Powerwall?
So we've had the panels since 2010. Wow. 2010, 2011. So we actually before Solar City existed, right?
Right.
And we had the same panels, and that's a bit of a story. So we got ready. We had hurricane damage a couple of years ago, and I got ready to put in new roof. And to do that, they had to take off all the old panels and then put the new roof on, and then put the old panels back on. So I had already put the deposit down on the Tesla roof, and so I called them. I said, "Hey, when are you guys going to have that available in this area?" And they said, "Well," I said, it's probably going to be a while. We probably won't know for at least another year. We won't know for another year. Right. So I said, well, shit, if you're not going to know for another year, it means another 2 years before you actually get it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I said, okay, fine. Sure. So I put the gears in motion, and we started the construction, right? So I started ripping off the roof and everything, and I get a phone call. Well, we're ready to install your roof. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I said, what happened to a year? You're not going to. Well, things happen. So I said, well, I got a contract with this guy right now. I can't kick him off the roof. And actually, I think it may have already been finished, at that point.
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, I would love to have gone through with it, but because it is very cost effective.
Oh yeah, for sure, and especially in Florida.
I was talking to a neighbor who's getting ready to put one in, and I wrote a check for $28,000 for my 10 kilowatt system. They're getting a 20 kilowatt system for like $32,000. So that shows you how far and how cheap it has gotten, right? So double the system for almost the same price.
Yeah, remarkable. It's really incredible. Yeah.
But with incentives and everything, it paid for itself. So I wrote a check for $28,000, but I got $23,000 off on taxes.
Oh my goodness!
Right. So because you're able to bundle it in with any kind of repairs you have to make, which was basically a new roof at the time.
Right.
So and so I was able to write. So basically, I only paid $5,000 for it, which it paid for itself in 2 years.
Oh yeah.
So for the last 8 years, I've been it's been free, and it's been saving me tons of money every year. So it generates about.
I'll have to remember that as a good secret. Like if we get like hail damage or something like that on the roof, that would be a good time to get solar panels. Because
absolutely,
you can roll that in.
And hopefully, with Biden and Green New Deal and all that good stuff, maybe they might. Because right now the incentive is to continually reduce that. The idea is to continually reduce the incentive. Right. Until it kind of goes away, which I think is reasonable at some point, but I don't think enough people are on board yet.
Yeah, I think we're too early for that.
I agree. It used to be like 30 or 32%, 33%, something like that. I think now it's down to like 28%.
Right.
But I think with the new administration, they're talking about, or there's rumors anyway, that they may either reenact it or even increase it.
Right.
So. Yeah, that's the way to buy it, is to replace your roof and get the solar at the same time.
Yeah, that's clever.
So this was really fun. We went to, they encourage students to do solar I think it's a solar learning center or something like that. We
Okay.
have locally here. Anyway, so every year they put on this presentation and they put on this show, and people, they make hot dog ovens, they make, all kinds of crazy stuff, right? But one of the highlight is they have a little track that they set up, and they race cars, electric cars. So the students, and these are, high school students, they build these cars from the ground up, and they race these cars around this track. So, and it was kind of fun watching them. But at the end of the race, they asked me to get on to race the track with them. So I have a video of me racing around this little track with these. I think I'm by myself, so I'm not on the track with them. But I have some video of them racing too, which is kind of cool. I mean, if you haven't seen it before, it's really neat to see kids, that they manufacture something that actually works, right? And that they're able to make it competitive,
That's very cool. I've seen like the robot wars where they have to make the autonomous robots that fight each other and do tasks and stuff, but I hadn't seen one with the solar, not for high school. I've seen it for college, but not for
right. No, these are high school kids, and it's so cool,
That's very
and then we would go as our club, and we'd have all our cars parked out front, and people were curious about them and stuff. And
oh, cool! That's a perfect environment for that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we do that a lot, actually. We were doing it every year. We'd have a kind of a meetup. And there's a National Electric Day. I don't know if you got National Electric Car Day, I think is what it is.
Oh,
and then, so actually it's fun to go, even if you just come as a not participant, but as a
just to check out what people have. So that's pretty cool.
And you talk to people about their experiences with the cars, and you could talk to a whole bunch of different owners, and manufacturers bring their cars also. So we invite it to anybody.
Wow,
and anybody's allowed.
That's really cool. Yeah.
And so and actually we've had manufacturers, we go up to them after the event, and they go, yeah, we've got like people coming there, they put down orders on cars, and people are going to come by, test drive and stuff. And it's fun. And we have like the solar roof guys come, and they show what they've got and talk about it, and they get a lot of orders from that as well.
All righty. Well, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the time. And
no, you're welcome.
If I think this will be a really fascinating interview for people to watch and like just discover, because of course, obviously, with Tesla growing exponentially, there's exponentially more people now that own or know about Tesla than did a decade ago. So I think it'll be fascinating for people to hear about, the good, the bad, the kind of weird, the fact that the roof leaked like a sieve, things like that. It's like, whoa. It's interesting things to hear about. So yeah, and congratulations on having that. Yeah,
John, it was so bad. They at the upper corner where the roof, the soft top came down, built into the A post, right?
Yeah,
the A pillar, right? Built into the A pillar, there was a rubber cup to catch the water drips.
Wait, by Elise, they made so they knew how bad it leaked. Jeez, come on, guys. That doesn't sound. It sounds conducive for California, but not so much for Florida. Like, because you guys do get serious rain.
We do. Like, but it really, that car rarely went out in the rain. I'd have to be caught in the rain.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those. Oopsie, you're out of the grocery store. You got to get back home again. So yeah. All right. Well, cool. On that note, I will say thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you all. And I will talk to everybody else later, of course, too. So, all right.
Okay. And I'll get those pictures to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right.
Cool. Okay, take care.
Right. Bye-bye.